Hello and welcome to another Telecom Innovator video. My name is Phil Harvey. I'm the editor-in-chief here at Light Reading, and this series is a sponsored series where we are bringing you the people and organizations that are helping move the global communications industry forward. In this particular interview, we're going to be talking to two folks, one from Palo Alto Networks, one from IBM, and they're going to talk about how their companies are working together to automate the delivery of 5G network slices. We'll get into what that means and all that that implies in just a moment. First, let me tell you, let me introduce our panelists. First of all, we have Keith from Palo Alto Networks, and we have Rakshit from IBM. Hello, gentlemen. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for making the time. And I guess the first thing we want to talk about is how network automation is critical and plays a critical role in delivering new enterprise services. And in conjunction with that, how do we think communication service providers are going to manage security for their new services using network slicing?
Yes, I can take that. So if you look at what the CSPs are doing today and forecasted to do over the next few years, to invest heavily in 5G technologies. And enterprise services represents a significant area of top line growth. Now, to achieve that, automation is becoming a underpinning of the technology pillars that are looking at to derive benefits and accelerate the market for them. So there are two benefits as telcos and CSPs compete in the market with their peers and with new competition coming from hyperscalers to target enterprise revenue. One is time to market. The rate at which new needs and new services are being created, driven by new 5G technology. Automation is a key area to get there. And the second one is operational efficiency. Pretty much every telco and CSP that I've talked to in the past few months, one of the first things comes in, how do we bring out operational costs out of the network? And intelligent automation is one of the areas that the CSPs are counting on to do that. So now if you look at CSPs leveraging network automation to deliver new services in areas with, including network slicing, security becomes a key aspect when you're looking at specific vertical use cases, like in financial services or healthcare, which need compliance to specific security needs. So, our collaboration with Palo Alto is specifically looking at how we can bring together the needs that are evolving in the industry and deliver that to the CSPs.
Yeah, I'll also add, Rashid, that we could look at the automation in two different lenses, right? So typically if we're coming from the telco environment or a networking environment, we're looking at automation more from how do we automate the overall infrastructure, which you went through just now. The other way to think of it is one of the reasons why we're deploying network slicing, 5G slicing, and 5G networks as a whole is to accelerate some of the newer applications that are going to be deployed on the MEC and supporting some of the 5G deployments. So in order to do that, we're leveraging a lot of the cloud technologies that we've been using probably for the last 5 to 10 years and looking at things such as how do we incorporate security into development pipelines, all automation. How do we do things such as automating microsegmentation within the network? How do we start looking at the automation of the infrastructure itself, the deployment of the infrastructure and the ongoing maintenance, right? And a lot of the lessons that we learned over the past 10 years in deploying in both public and private cloud can now be applied to this 5G infrastructure and more specifically what we're building with 5G network slicing.
Thanks for that. Yeah. So the takeaway for me, on this is that obviously, 5G has sped everything up, and you really, and it's not only sped up our ability to deliver services, but it's also sped up the ability for threats to, manifest themselves in the network. So automation is critical. It had, the network has to be automated in order to keep up, and for service providers, network automation is key to, keeping the network secure. but there's also, kind of this enabling technology that you both talked about, 5G network slices. So let's back up and talk about what 5G network slices are and what technology trends have come together to enable that to happen.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll take that one, Phil. So, my background primarily for the last 25 years, I was working before Palo Alto for a very large network vendor. And so the way I tend to explain network slicing, if you're coming from a networking environment, think of it like a VLAN, right? So we're taking a virtual segment of that radio and core network and dividing it up either logically or even sometimes physically. We can devote resources to these individual slices. So you have a virtual RAN, you have a virtual network within that overall 5G network. Now, what that allows us to do, and some of the things that allowed us to do this to begin with, is what I mentioned before, a lot of the cloud technologies coming together. And one of the things that we do also have to bear in mind, being a telco or particularly the cloud providers have been working on this for quite a while, is that as we're deploying cloud native applications on these networks, the developers of these cloud native applications are expecting, to push out application updates sometimes multiple times a day. The speed of those updates is not something that we can manage the network like we used to 10 years ago, where we're deploying something and it's kind of living in the network for 5 to 10 years or longer. And then we go ahead and maybe every year or biannually, we go ahead and do network upgrades. That world is gone, right? So we have to be just as agile as these application developers that are writing these applications for the network and ensure that the security within the network and the network itself can adapt to the application developers. Because what will happen is if we get in the way of the application developers, and I've seen this I worked on enterprise as well for quite a while, they'll just go around you, right? So they'll figure out a way to get around your security. You're not going to slow down their application deployment. So us working on the telco side and on the cloud side, we have to ensure that we're keeping up with those deployments and the folks that are working on the application side.
Yeah, I would add, network functions are applications delivering some of the 5G services as well. So there is a lifecycle management aspect of it. You're going to see multiple vendors delivering various network functions to the CSPs, and each of them have a different lifecycle speed at which they are evolving, and not always orchestrated as we've seen, in vertically integrated solutions in the past. So now, you when you're looking at a network operation setup for the 5G networks, you're looking at a pretty complex pipeline of updates that are going through. You're looking at orchestrating that update procedure and potentially even integrating testing into that. So you are not just deploying them independent of an integrated test approach. And then you're on top of that looking and making sure your services that you're delivering that are dependent on those network functions are also tied into the update pipeline, so to speak. So I really think that security being an integrated part of this update and lifecycle management pipeline is key in making sure that it's architecturally thought in and developed for the 5G networks.
So let's talk a little bit about the security issues themselves. What security issues does network slicing help address, or where I guess is it of primary importance?
Yeah, I could take that one, Phil. So I was working with a few large healthcare manufacturers. I mean, think manufacturers of like MRI machines, heart rate monitors, that sort of thing. And as I mentioned, I've been working in the networking space for quite a long time, along with security. In the way, if you go into most hospitals, large hospitals today, the way that they're structured is they may allocate a VLAN or a separate wireless SSID for all of these healthcare devices. And what they do, and these healthcare devices have to call home, right? They have to call home for firmware updates or for maintenance from the technicians. And what ends up happening is that they're normally today going through the hospital's firewall, right? So, and the hospital's infrastructure. So all of the hospital IT staff, they're responsible for, if something doesn't work, they're kind of scrambling around, and the manufacturer of the MRI machine calls them up, hey, we can no longer get to the MRI machine. And it's usually because somebody changed the firewall or there's some network change. And it's really frustrating for the manufacturers because every single hospital is bespoke, right? None of them are the same. And it's, if you have thousands of these around the country and the world, it becomes very difficult to manage. So a network slice, a 5G network slice, from the standpoint of a healthcare manufacturer, what they're looking at is, in the long term, embedding 5G radios in those healthcare devices, and then having a separate network slice, either on, it could be microcells in the hospital, or just a larger macro network slice going into the hospital, and having that completely separate from the hospital infrastructure. And surprisingly, you would think that the hospital may want to own that. They don't want to own it. Like if you go into them and say, hey, we're going to take that headache off and put it on a 5G network slice, and your IT folks won't have to worry about that anymore. They'll be, thank God, please take it. Right. So that's a perfect, and it helps the security, because now we can also apply the appropriate security controls on that network slice that are appropriate for something like healthcare. Right. So that's a very realistic one. Are they going to get to the point immediately of getting those radios in the devices right away? No, that's going to take some time, but they're already today building gateways, right? So having like a Wi-Fi to 5G gateway and then hopping on the slice eventually. So in the long run, though, the goal of most of those manufacturers is to use 5G network slicing to have a completely dedicated and secure network outside of the hospital infrastructure. And you could extend that example to many other verticals, similar kind of problems.
Yeah, and if you look at how a CSP would deliver a service like this to a healthcare provider, right? It's a combination of the 5G technologies, the automation, the services that are needed to manage the life cycle, not just of the network function of the services, but also the client infrastructure as it interfaces with the CSP network. So it's a pretty complex set of technology and tools that are required to deliver that. Now, if you add to that the costs for doing that and the efficiencies that are needed, automation comes again at play to not just accelerate these services, but also take out the operational inefficiencies. The other piece is the SLA management, right? How do CSPs ensure that they're delivering to the SLAs they're committing to their enterprise customers, in this case, a healthcare provider as an example, and making sure that they have an efficient way of validating the SLA is met, both on the service, the underlying services front in terms of the bandwidth, the delay, et cetera, but also on added security that they deliver, to making sure that the firewall configurations are updated, the threat response times are in line with the SLA, and that they've signed up for. So threat management at scale is an area where, again, a well thought out solution is needed. This is what we've been striving for, working together with Palo Alto.
So let's talk about how you two or how your companies are working together. What is the joint solution that Palo Alto Networks and IBM is bringing to market, and what issues does it solve for service provider customers, and what type of outcomes have they gained by deploying the solution?
So I can lead with this one. So what we've strived to do is we've first looking at how do we get the business intent configured into the network in an automated way. So we expect the BSS systems of a CSP to pass down business intent to network orchestration tools. In IBM's case, IBM's Cloud Platform Network Automation. This would then take the business intent of delivering a network slice for a use case like the healthcare that we've been discussing, and configure that. That this business intent would come with a set of security needs. So what are the firewall configurations that are needed? What parts of the network need to be, of the network slice need to be secure? Come in with the business intent. We have automated the provisioning of that. Not only that, we've also automated the validation of the business intent. That once we've configured the network slice, is there an end-to-end SLA that we could test in terms of the performance of the network slice. And lastly, can we simulate threats and see if our security configurations are working as desired, and make sure that's integrated into the service delivery part of the network slice. And this is orchestrated through working across a set of technologies that we have put together. We should talk about that a little bit more in detail. And last piece is the threat response. So when we are going into a live operational environment, how are the threats being managed and responded to, again, in an automated way, with the need of, again, bringing the efficiency factor really high into the solution. So what we put together is a set of technologies, both from IBM, Palo Alto Networks, and also other partners who are providing 5G core, radio network functions, testing functions like we've used Spirent for that in our solution today. And we put together this solution where the IBM Cloud Platform Network Automation acts as the master orchestrator, works with the Palo Alto CN series firewall as part of delivering the intent for security, configuring that, and then also stitch together the messages that come from the network, where we are looking at various threats and other security responses, passing that down through IBM Security QRadar, which is an SIEM, and passing those on to the security SOAR for automated playbook-based responses on what happens when you see a certain type of threat, and then work with the orchestration tool to respond to that, which could be quarantining a certain user edge, or providing an update to the firewall configurations, or the 5G core configurations to block certain types of devices. So we've kind of talked through that at an automated level. How do we work through this and make sure that validation is also integrated into our workflows?
Yeah, I'll just also add one of the things we worked on together is ensuring that from a security point of view, as we're looking at the security function within this architecture, that when a threat is detected on that network slice, we can not only detect the threat on the slice, but we can figure out exactly from like an MZ user and device ID where that threat came from. So a provider then, if we use the healthcare example, right, we can they could be applying the appropriate security policies for healthcare, maybe filtering certain things, looking for specific threats. But when a threat does occur, they'll be able to see specifically which device on the network is doing, let's say, a command and control callback, and then potentially offer that as a service for remediation, or at the very least, alerting their customers to which device on the network is causing the issue, right? So that's something unique that we developed in the industry that looks a little bit more detail into the GTP packet and can pull that information out from the mobile network. And I don't think Rashid, I don't know if Rashid mentioned it, but we'll be demonstrating all of this at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona in about a month and a half. So if you happen to be there, stop by the IBM booth and we can show you live the demo that we're talking about here.
Absolutely. We'd love to demonstrate what we've got put together here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's exactly what I was going to wrap up on. Is like, this sounds great. Now, where can we see this in action? So it sounds like go to the IBM booth at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, and you can check out this demo up close and personal. And that is how Palo Alto Networks and IBM are working to automate the delivery of secure 5G network slices for enterprise customers. Rakshit and Keith, thanks so much for the expertise and the information. I do appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.